There was a young man named Shun who was simple, innocent, and had a deep fascination for rare gemstones and crystals. For a long time, he believed that crystals contained another world within them, and someday he would be able to visit that world. One day, he was sitting with his mother, who happened to be an archaeologist and also had a passion for gemstones and rare jewelry. They were both excited to celebrate his father Asana's birthday. However, as usual, his father was busy with his research and seemed unaware of anything happening around him. In fact, he didn't even realize his birthday was approaching. Days passed, and Asana's birthday finally arrived. After waiting a long time, Shun decided to go by himself to fetch his father and bring him home. Shun went to his father's place, Professor Asana, who was deeply absorbed in his research and didn't respond to his son's calls, indifferent to anyone around him. Suddenly, Shun found his father's workspace empty, but he noticed a strange gemstone mounted on a device. As he held it, he was captivated by its unique shape. Suddenly, a strange light emerged from the gemstone, growing brighter until it finally entered his body. Then, a mysterious gate opened before him, and he was sucked into it. In another world, a mysterious man wielding a dagger swiftly moved through an unfamiliar place, taking down guards and concealing his face. He stood before a large gate and entered a royal chamber. There, he approached an old man who was asleep. With a bit of hesitation, he raised his dagger to kill his father's enemy. Before he could strike, the old man opened his eyes and caught his hand, saying, "You're not Emilio, are you?" Emilio gasped, stepping back and dropping his dagger. The old man was King Diles. Emilio wanted to kill him because he believed Diles was responsible for his father's death. Emilio's father had once been a king and had died under mysterious circumstances. Diles said, "How shameful, young prince, to attack me in my sleep. At least be a real man and reclaim your kingdom properly." Enraged, Emilio suddenly emitted a strange light from his chest, then drew a long weapon. Diles also brought forth a glowing weapon from his chest, though with a different form. They engaged in a fierce battle, but Diles was much stronger and managed to disarm Emilio, causing him to drop his weapon. Just as Emilio braced himself for death, Diles struck his weapon into the wall, and it vanished. Diles said, "You'll need to be much stronger to kill me, but unfortunately, you're still too weak." Suddenly, soldiers entered the room, capturing Emilio and taking him to a cell. While sitting in the cell, Emilio remembered his childhood. He used to admire Diles, respect him, and wanted to be as strong as him. But he overheard the servants talking, pitying him as a naive boy. One servant said, "Poor child. He loves Diles but doesn't know that Diles is his father's enemy and the cause of his death." Emilio was shocked, realizing that the world was filled with hatred and revenge, where even brothers could kill each other for the throne. He was trapped in this cycle of vengeance, training tirelessly to avenge his father's death. Back in the present, Emilio was still furious at Diles, when suddenly a bright light appeared. It turned out that Shun had entered this strange world and fell before Emilio. Emilio was surprised, not understanding how this boy could have entered through the walls. Shun was equally confused and had no idea where he was. All he remembered was holding a gemstone and then entering this strange world, as if lost in another dimension. Emilio, suspicious, asked, "Did you come from the surface?" Shun, puzzled, replied, "Surface? I came from my father's workspace." While the two argued, they suddenly heard the sound of approaching soldiers. One day, Emilio told Shun to hide quickly, as he'd be in trouble if the guards saw him. But suddenly, the guards entered, enraged upon seeing Shun, and planned to kill him. Shun, who wasn't the fighting type, felt scared. However, his chest suddenly started to glow, and a strange weapon appeared from within him. Instinctively, he grabbed the weapon and, with a single strike, defeated all the guards. He even managed to break Emilio's cell. It was an incredibly powerful weapon. Emilio, watching in shock, didn't have time to process it as they quickly fled from the place. After escaping the cell, they hid and thought about how to get out of the castle. Shun, feeling like Superman, was convinced that the weapon could transform into anything he wanted, maybe even a dragon or something. But Emilio scolded him. "Shut up. If we get caught, it'll be dangerous. Hide your weapon quickly." Shun didn't know how to hide the weapon. Emilio then suggested he think of something that relaxed him and take a deep breath. As soon as Shun thought of quartz, his favorite crystal, the weapon instantly vanished. Emilio then led him to a hidden corridor, and when they stepped on a certain stone, a secret door opened. Once outside, they encountered a strange creature. Shun, clueless, thought it was just a regular person wearing a plastic mask. Emilio explained that the creature was a member of the Zoo tribe, specifically created by King Deliz to guard the castle. Suddenly, the creature drew a weapon from its hand, and Emilio drew his own weapon as well. He urged Shun to summon his weapon quickly, but Shun didn't know how to do it, as his weapon only appeared randomly. The battle between Emilio and the creature was fierce, with Emilio constantly urging Shun to draw his weapon. Panicked, Shun shouted that he didn't know how. When the creature perceived him as weak and moved in for the kill, Shun's weapon suddenly reappeared. He immediately used it to attack the creature, but only managed to injure it slightly. The creature quickly recovered and prepared to strike Shun again, but Emilio intercepted the attack and told Shun to stay focused. The creature then unleashed a terrifying power, causing them to fall into the sea. Just then, another creature appeared, warning that they must not kill the intruders, as it would anger the king. However, the creature seemed indifferent. Underwater, Shun struggled to breathe, but Emilio quickly pulled him to safety. They found a hidden place called the Slaughterhouse. There, Emilio asked Shun, how could someone from the surface possess such a cursed weapon? Shun admitted he didn't know how to use it and asked where they were and why all of this was happening to him. Emilio informed him that they were in Endor, a world beneath the Earth's surface. After leaving the hideout, an exhausted Shun nearly collapsed, but Emilio caught him. They then encountered a girl named Alicia, who was shocked to see Shun. Emilio introduced Shun as someone from the Earth's surface. They continued through the forest, with Shun repeatedly asking where they were and what was happening, but no one would answer. After some debate with Emilio, they arrived at a beautiful place that was lit not by the sun, but by a large crystal. A confused Shun asked to be introduced to everyone. Emilio finally revealed that he was the son of King Langa, and that the girl's name was Alicia, along with her pet, Faya. They continued their journey before the soldiers arrived. Meanwhile, the king received word of the prince's escape and learned that someone was helping him with remnants of a very rare sacred weapon. The king was eager to know all the information about Shun and his weapon. He was convinced that Emilio was still alive and couldn't have died so easily, believing Emilio must have gone to his usual place. Then, we returned to Julio and his friends, while Shun, still confused, wondered where they were headed. Finally, Alicia informed them they were going to see Pascal, the person responsible for research in the castle, who had also raised Emilio. Suddenly, while they were talking, a strange, pig-like creature rushed toward them. Emilio immediately drew his weapon and told Shun to do the same. Shun didn't understand until he saw Val, a small creature, transform into a large dragon and begin attacking the monster. Emilio joined the attack with his weapon, but the monster was much stronger than him. Val then bit the monster fiercely, and the battle became intense. Just when Shun thought they had defeated the monster, another creature appeared and attacked them. Shun's weapon suddenly emerged from his body on its own, and he used it to slay the monster in a single strike. They were finally able to rest. However, they suddenly fell into a trap that lifted them into the air. The monster overpowered Val and charged toward Emilio, who then realized there was a trap beneath his feet and managed to direct the creature into it. Afterward, Uncle Pascal appeared, saved them, and welcomed them warmly. When Alicia saw Shun's weapon, she was shocked and asked how he could have a sacred weapon despite being from the surface. Shun couldn't answer and hid his weapon again, trying to come to terms with everything happening. They all then entered Pascal's home. Emilio and Shun shared a room, where they continued to argue, unable to tolerate each other, while elsewhere, strange creatures began to appear. The creatures started sniffing around to locate them. Later, Shun joined the others for a meal, and they finally made peace. While they were eating, Pascal asked Shun how he ended up coming from the surface. Shun explained that he had been in his father's office when he found a strangely glowing crystal and suddenly found himself in this world. At that moment, they all realized that his weapon was a remnant of a sacred weapon, though Shun himself didn't understand. Shun asked how he could return home and where he was exactly. Pascal thought for a moment, then pulled out a large map and explained that they were on this planet. Pascal pointed to Andu City, where they currently were, located underground. He also showed them another place called Admus, which was the source of light like the sun, as well as the North Pole, which served as the primary light source that acted like the sun above, while at night, that light functioned as a moon illuminating the entire city. Shun then asked why there were no stars in the sky, and Pascal explained that in Andu, there were no stars, and they had never seen the phases of the moon either. With the weather, they're always stable and unchanging. All of this information was unknown to anyone on the surface. Pascal went on to explain that everyone on the surface believed this underground world to be hell, a horrible and terrifying place, so no one knew about the world of Andu. Shun then asked how they all knew about the surface. Pascal then showed him a book from the surface that they had found in the royal library, which contained all the information about the upper world. Shun looked at the book and realized that there had indeed been contact between the upper world and Andu at one time, though he was still confused as to how that had happened. At that time, people were able to move between worlds and discovered a city called Babylon, which connected the two worlds. Through this city, they could reach the Earth's surface, but unfortunately, the city was completely destroyed. Because of this, the barrier between the two worlds vanished, and King Delis began efforts to rebuild the city. When it was almost complete, a problem arose that had to be resolved before he could continue its reconstruction. After much conversation, Pascal asked Shun to show his magical weapon. Of course, Shun didn't know how to summon it, as the weapon only appeared in times of great trouble. Shun then took a deep breath, and the weapon eventually appeared on its own. Pascal was surprised by the weapon's appearance, but he only said, "Good, put it back now." Shun felt a bit annoyed, but returned it easily. Emilio, who was watching, was amazed at how comfortable Shun was in handling the weapon. Then, Shun asked Pascal to show his weapon, and Pascal explained that not everyone in Bandura possessed such holy weapons. Many lacked the talent. Alicia then told Shun that Foul was her holy weapon. Pascal began explaining that holy weapons are made from a powerful energy called material distortion, which exists only in the underworld. That energy transforms into weapons. Shun wasn't too interested in this scientific lesson and just wanted to return home as soon as possible. However, Emilio opposed him, and Pascal recalled when he once warned King Delis about the dangers of connecting the underworld to the Earth's surface, but the king didn't listen. Pascal eventually decided to leave them before disaster struck. Later, the king was seen sitting with his assistant, who informed him that Babylon was being rebuilt, but a major issue had halted the process, and it was due to Pascal's actions. The king instructed him to resolve the problem immediately to restore order. Meanwhile, troops and beasts were heading toward Pascal's house, which began to shake violently. Pascal saw them from his window and realized they were royal forces. The traps and explosives he had set around his house began to detonate, hitting the beasts with thrilling action scenes and a large rocket launch he used to escape. Pascal admitted to them that he was the reason Babylon hadn't been completed. He knew people would realize his mistakes one day and correct them. Shun felt pleased and asked, "So, does this mean you can finish Babylon?" Pascal replied, "Yes, in due time." Shun was overjoyed, but he reminded them they were under attack because Emilio had escaped from the castle prison. They continued their journey to a mysterious place and eventually arrived at a secret underground area that Pascal had prepared as a hideout for any major crises. After getting settled, Pascal sat with Emilio and asked how he met Shun. Emilio explained that he was in a prison cell when a magical crystal ball suddenly appeared, showing a beautiful scene he had never seen before. From there, Shun appeared. Back with Shun, still fascinated by rocks, Alicia was puzzled by his interest, and Shun explained that his mother was an archaeologist who instilled a love for this world in him. He then mentioned to Alicia that he had heard of the Ingra theory on Earth and thought this place was called Shambhala. Alicia then clarified that its actual name was Andoria. "What do you think? Ever thought about going to the surface?" Oddly, when he said no, It wasn't possible, and he'd never considered it. Meanwhile, Pascal spoke with Emilio, saying that even though the two worlds were aware of each other, they couldn't unite. Ancient books had warned about it, and everyone knew the underworld was either hell or a place of death. Only a few believed that the underworld was a paradise called Shambhala. Then, when he said that after many years, they had finally managed to create a replacement for Babel and establish the Babylon region, which once connected Endor to the Earth's surface, but after some time, that stopped, and the king was trying to fix it. Therefore, he needed Pascal and his team's help. But of course, Pascal refused and didn't want their worlds to be connected. Interestingly, Emilio despised the king, viewing him as a selfish demon. But Pascal reminded him, "Don't forget that he raised you and treated you like his own child. Though you two often clashed, he still cares about you." Emilio, however, didn't care and asked, "You know they're coming for you, right?" Pascal then explained that he had tampered with the map of the Babel region, so they couldn't fix it. That's why they were searching for him. At that moment, Emilio was shocked and asked, "You mean the king will go to Babylon to fix Babel?" Pascal answered, "Yes, so we must get there before him and repair Babel so we can restore the world's balance. After that, he will destroy the city forever." Of course, Emilio was shocked by his words, but Pascal didn't care and left. At that moment, Emilio looked at his weapon and recalled his childhood when he was rough and strong. And no one knew how to handle him except Pascal, who understood him and started to care, teaching him many things in various fields. One day, Pascal pursued the king, attempting to warn him that if he restored Babel, he would destroy Endor, but the king didn't care and even dismissed him. At that moment, Emilio witnessed this and grew to hate the king even more. Sometime later, we returned to the king, who was furious upon learning of Pascal's escape. The soldiers apologized to him until a group of monsters arrived, saying, "Stand aside. We'll catch him for you." The king then informed them that all they could do was stay updated and were forbidden from killing anyone. We returned to Pascal, who is disguised and has altered his appearance to bring enough food for everyone. He said, "If I don't return by tomorrow night, meet me in the village of Megiddo, but they must be cautious as the roads are very dangerous." After that, Alicia decided to go fetch some drinking water, and Emilio took advantage of the situation and said to Shun, "We need to talk." Once Alicia had left, the two sat down awkwardly, despite not liking each other. Emilio asked, "Don't you want to go back to your home?" Shun replied, "Of course, I can hardly stand being there." At that moment, Emilio said, "Then help us kill King Dales." Naturally, Shun refused vehemently, but Emilio explained that the king would be going to Babylon, and if he got there first, Shun would never be able to return home, so he had to stop him before he arrived. Finally, Shun reluctantly agreed to hear the plan. Emilio told him they would make their move after Alicia fell asleep, as they couldn't bring her along. Suddenly, Alicia herself appeared, and the two were startled and nearly caught. But Emilio quickly pulled Shun aside and said they were going hunting. Eventually, they set out, drew their weapons, and walked into the forest to hunt wild boar. They planned it out. Shun would drive the boar toward Emilio, who would kill it. Sure enough, Shun managed to herd the boar, which charged randomly toward Emilio. Ready to strike, Emilio stumbled, and just before the boar could attack him, Shun quickly saved him and killed the boar. Afterwards, they brought the boar back to Alicia, who came out to greet them. However, as usual, they argued and nearly came to blows. Alicia then prepared a meal, though Shun wasn't happy about eating wild boar meat but forced himself to do so. That night, Emilio woke up and moved quickly to an unfamiliar location. Using binoculars, he said, "Finally, I found it," as he directed his forces to attack the army's camp. Before Shun understood his intention, the guards had surrounded them, pressing weapons to their necks. They declared that they weren't part of the kingdom of Dales and intended to kill them. One of them said, "Everyone here knows the land of Agona belongs to us, and no one may enter unless they wish to die." Confused, Shun finally realized that Emilio sought help from this group for his mission. Emilio then introduced himself as the prince and requested to speak with the leader of Amadeus, who happened to be standing before him, named Demo. Demo was puzzled as to why the prince had come alone to see him. Emilio revealed that he wanted Demo's help, along with his team, to defeat King Dales. Everyone was shocked at hearing this, and they talked until morning. Emilio explained that he'd heard rumors that Demo's group was a band of strong fighters, even stronger than the Zhu clan. However, the bandits laughed at him and weren't interested in his words, which infuriated Emilio. He explained that he had left everything behind just to defeat the king. Demo, still unconvinced, decided to test him and said, "All right, suppose you succeed in killing the king. What will you do next?" Emilio was silent, unsure how to answer, and finally said, "I just want to kill him." The leader laughed loudly at Emilio's answer, grabbed his shirt, and said, "Are we supposed to listen to your foolishness? The king should be ashamed to have a failure like you, who ultimately wants to kill him too." Emilio, enraged, immediately attacked Demo with all his strength. But Demo quickly dodged, causing Emilio to fall to the ground. Demo explained that revenge alone was not enough to justify Emilio sacrificing everything. While they talked, Shun drew his weapon, ready to fight, but was soon bound with rope like captured prey. However, Emilio didn't care and told Demo that after killing the king, he would take over the throne. Demo replied, "My child, that should be what you're thinking. But even if we manage to kill the king, we won't benefit without our role in the kingdom." Shun then said he would follow Emilio until he became a powerful king, and they would be part of his team. Demo pulled out his weapon, dropped it to the ground, and said, "If you want to join us, I don't mind. But you'll have to work hard. If you succeed in defeating Dales, we will always support you. But if you fail, we will return to our old ways." Meanwhile, Uncle Pascal visited his colleague and learned about activities in the palace, how Dales and his followers worked day and night to reclaim Babylon. Until now, no one knew the king's true intentions for that land. They also heard that a researcher discovered that the old weapons from the Endor War were mysteriously dwindling, so they had to investigate the king's intentions. Then, we returned to Demo's village, where Emilio and Shun, looking tired, were washing clothes. Even Demo's team joined in to help. While they chatted, a woman named Yellow suddenly fainted. They told Emilio that Yellow was always unlucky and often got into trouble. Yellow also had a special ability that allowed her to see someone's future. Curious, Shun asked her what she saw, and Yellow said, "I see your future in a new world, a place I've never seen before. I see you standing alone there." Shun was pleased to hear this, feeling confident that he would return home. But unknown to him, Yellow saw a great fear and shock in his eyes because of something mysterious. Labascal arrived at the cave and saw Alice, who looked furious. Alice informed him that the two people had been missing since morning. She said, "They must have gone to Babylon on their own with the intention of doing something dangerous. Let's go after them." She then boarded her small aircraft and flew in their direction. Meanwhile, the two were, as usual, bickering and couldn't stand each other. Shun started spouting nonsense, saying, "You're crazy and selfish, wanting to kill your own father. No wonder everyone hates you. No one will ever like you." Furious, Emilio drew his weapon, and so did Shun. However, they threw their weapons to the ground and began fighting hand to hand, hitting each other until their faces were bruised. They fought with intense anger and strength until they both collapsed from exhaustion. Demo and his friend then poured water on them to revive them. Demo believed that this fight would ultimately strengthen their friendship. Afterward, they were taken to the tent to prepare for their next mission. Demo brought some reports, explaining that all the nobles around the castle were allied with the king and disliked Demo's team. They even wanted to eliminate them. Demo's team felt disappointed that these people didn't even give them a chance to be heard, automatically viewing them as enemies simply because of the king. However, Demo informed them that in the north, many people despised the king, especially those who opposed his orders and were exiled as a result. He then added that he didn't know the exact number of royal guards, but Emilio estimated there were about 80,000 soldiers. Demo was a bit anxious, as this number was much larger than he'd anticipated. Clearly, it was impossible for him to face the royal guards now without a large team. So, he and his team started discussing the challenges of gathering a large force. He suggested they seek help from the Zhou clan. Emilio responded, "You're insane. Who from the Zhou clan would want to ally with us? Half of them are royal soldiers." But Demo didn't care and asked, "Have you ever tried talking to any of them?" Shun replied, "I once killed one of them. He was tough and powerful, and it's highly unlikely they'll agree to your plan." Still, Demo asked again, "Have you ever tried speaking with someone from Zhou?" Shun looked surprised and admitted, "No, I haven't." Demo then told them that most of the Zhou clan suffered oppression from the king and the nobles, who viewed them as inferior. Because of this, it was possible they might agree to join their mission. If that happened, they'd have a very strong army. Demo then turned to Luis, saying, "I'll need you to negotiate with them. We have to convince them to stand with us and fight so we can achieve our goal." However, Shun wasn't interested in this plan and preferred going to Babylon and returning home. He said, "You're only doing all of this to get rid of King Daliz. I know the king is headed to Pablo, so we should go there instead." It was strange for Demo to hear that the king was going there. Afterward, Emilio and Shun returned to their tent with Luis, each thinking about when they could get rid of the other and finally have some peace. When they arrived at the tent, as usual, they avoided looking at each other, as if they were enemies. Shun wanted to ensure that the monster they encountered wasn't from the Zhou clan. Shortly after, Luis came in with a box of medicine, but Shun asked him, "Why does Demo want to work with the Zhou clan when they're just a bunch of monsters?" Luis replied, "Not all of them are monsters. They're the ones who've suffered the most under the kingdom, and there's a deeper reason behind their violence. The reason is Andres." Luis then explained that most people in Endor were descended from the Ando race. The people of the Zhou clan were also born from Ando and beasts. They all lived together in harmony until the Andres began oppressing them and tried to take control of everything in Endor. After this, the story continues with him meeting someone from the Zhou race, initially mistaken for a human since many of the Zhou looked intimidating and didn't speak much. However, some of them were kind. Later, a female character tended to their wounds, and Shun asked her if Demo had ever met someone from the Zhou before. The woman was from a respected family, living with her wife and not caring much about the things around her until everything changed because of her friend from the Zhou. A flashback showed Demo as a child, riding his horse through the forest when a monster suddenly attacked him. His horse ran off in fear, leaving him lost. That's when someone from the Zhou clan appeared, looking more human-like. Frightened, Demo offered money in exchange for safety, but the Zhou approached, ignoring the money, and asked for his name. Demo introduced himself, and the Zhou revealed his name to be Lucio. Lucio then called a large boar to carry Demo back to the edge of the city. Demo began frequently visiting the forest, whistling as Lucio had taught him to call him, until they became good friends and often went on adventures together. One day, they encountered a giant monster. Demo tried to fight it with a sword but was too weak. Lucio then used his sacred weapon, injuring the monster and forcing it to flee. Demo was disappointed, feeling weak and believing that only those with sacred weapons were strong. But Lucio reminded him that true strength comes from training, not weapons. Demo still felt weak without the weapon, and eventually, they argued. They fought until Demo fell, but Lucio told him that he could become strong through courage and perseverance. A weapon is useless if the one wielding it is weak. Years passed, and they became close friends. One day, they saw two humans torturing an exhausted Zhou creature. Demo was furious and protested against their actions, but one of the humans raised a whip to strike him. Lucio immediately drew his weapon and cut the whip. However, Lucio's actions angered the humans, who thought he was out of line. They called their companions and attacked Lucio mercilessly. Even Demo, who tried to help, was injured and fell. The last thing Demo saw was his friend surrounded and beaten. That night, Lucio was dying but said to Demo, "Take care of yourself, friend. I'm glad to have been your friend." Lucio closed his eyes and passed away. Demo was shocked and vowed to become strong and avenge him. Demo snapped out of his thoughts when he heard Leo's voice, telling him that he had treated their wounds and left them in the tent. But, as usual, they still often quarreled. Demo told him, "One day they will be friends," returning to the two characters who slept separately, each thinking about their life goals. Shun was contemplating a revolution to overthrow the king, which he thought was foolish, and wanted to return to his own world. On the other hand, Emilian wanted the revolution to succeed so he could kill Dills. The next day, Shun met Leo and asked if he could foresee the future as he had yesterday. He asked what would happen, and Leo replied, "Yes, of course." At that moment, Shun began to think about scaring or hurting him, especially since Leo could see the future when he felt scared or had strong emotions. Shun pretended to be afraid, pointing to the floor where there was actually a trap, but Leo did not step on it. Shun quickly pulled the trap string, but the trap fell far from him. Realizing his intentions, Leo decided to get revenge. He told Shun, "If you find a blue bird circling, you can easily return to the surface," pointing to a place where he could find the bird. Believing him, Shun ran quickly but ended up falling into a trap Leo had set. Yet he didn't care and got up immediately, continuing his search for the blue bird. After feeling disappointed, Shun realized there was no bird by that name and understood Leo had done it only for revenge. In reality, Leo saw the future suddenly and not because of fear or emotion, as others thought. Then, the story shifts to the group of Zwa monsters searching for Dim's troops to eliminate them and capture the prince to return him to the king. The leader told them to do as they pleased, as long as the prince was unharmed. They then all flew in the sky as they sensed Xian approaching, while poor Xian was running around looking for the blue bird. Suddenly, the Zwa monsters appeared in front of him, and he was, of course, very shocked. At the same time, another Zwa team attacked the entire area, destroying tents, killing the inhabitants, and causing widespread chaos. Poor Xian fought alone against the giant monster, struggling to defend himself. Emilio came running to find him, trying to convince himself he didn't care about him, although he was truly worried. While Xian fought with all his strength, the monster was much stronger and attacked him brutally, knocking him down and causing him to drop his weapon. Just as the monster was about to finish him off, Emilio arrived just in time to block the attack. Yet amidst the chaos, they continued arguing. Xian said, "What brings you here? I don't need your help," to which Emilio replied, "Just be quiet, let's defeat this monster first, and then we can continue our fight." At that moment, the monster declared that the king wanted him alive without a scratch, so he had a better idea. He began attacking them and disarmed Emilio. But Xian rushed and attacked the monster with all his might. Despite the monster's resistance, it was eventually thrown hard against a tree. The monster then hurried to kill him, but surprisingly, Xian's weapon suddenly grew stronger, and with one strike, the monster was thrown away. Xian was astonished and didn't understand what caused the bright light. The monster asked how he could strengthen his weapon so quickly. For the first time, the two of them joined forces, attacking the monster fiercely, wounding it in the chest until it finally fled. As they prepared to rest after the fight, they heard the sound of a fierce battle between Dim's troops and the Zwa monsters. The battle was chaotic, and everyone fought desperately against the Zwa. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the sky, catching everyone's attention, and Dim's troops vanished from the area. The monsters were furious, but the leader ordered them to stay calm because they would use them for other purposes. Then we see Xian and Emilio running as fast as they can through the forest before anyone can spot them. After reaching a safe spot, they stop to rest, startled by a sudden light. There, they encounter Alicia and Pascal, who look unusual, carrying a device called the light burner. However, Emilio is uneasy with their presence because his mission is dangerous. Pascal then explains that they are friends and should help when there's trouble, especially if it involves a group with plans like Dim's team. The two teams stare at each other, looking as if they are about to fight. But Emilio tells them they are friends and didn't come to fight or hurt anyone. However, Dim seems unconvinced. When the two are with King Dealies, Emilio doesn't know how to respond but is forced to leave before the monsters find them again. Shortly after, they arrive in a new city, but Dimo's team decides to keep their distance, and Sean feels confused, not knowing what to do, especially as Pascal and Alicia are upset with them and don't want to deal with them. After some time, Pascal speaks with Emilio and scolds him, making sure that Emilio understands he has lost his mind if he intends to kill the king who raised him like his own father. However, Emilio doesn't care and is deeply driven by revenge against his birth father's killer, which is why he works with Dimo's team. At that point, Pascal says to him, "Are you really sure that the king killed your father? It's possible you're wrong." Of course, Emilio has no proof. He only heard the servants talking and trusted them without verifying the truth. Pascal tries to convince him that perhaps Emilio misunderstood the king, or that, even if the king had a reason to kill his father, it was complicated. However, Emilio is convinced that Delis killed his father to take the throne, to become king in his father's place. Emilio refuses to listen to Pascal and walks away from him. We return to Alicia, who is angry with Emilio for leaving her in the cave. As she walks, she runs into him on the road. She recalls an old event, how they first met. We learn that she comes from a servant family and often entered the palace, where she met Emilio, who was very intense while practicing sword dueling. Then we return to Dimo's team, who searched the entire city but didn't find the royal guards. However, they realize they can't stay there too long, so they need to gather more people and continue their mission. At the same time, they decide to let Shun and Emilio stay with them for a while. Maybe they can help. Meanwhile, Shun is looking for them and asks the restaurant owner about them. He even argues with the owner until Dimo enters and sits with them. At that moment, Shun tells them that Emilio and his friends are overly emotional and dislike sad things, and that Alicia and Pascal have been friends for a long time. Pascal used to work in the royal laboratory. After that, Shun tells them he's not interested in the issue and only wants to reach Babel to return to his hometown. He's not interested in fighting or helping Emilio get revenge on the king. He just wants to go back to his family. At that moment, Dimo takes out a map and shows that the journey to Babel is difficult because they have to cross a vast sea and a forest full of dangerous monsters, as well as long nights. But Shun doesn't care. He just wants to go home to his mother, who is likely alone now because his father often left her alone at home. Importantly, Dimo tells them that King Delis is also heading to Babel, meaning the king's forces will be smaller than those at the castle. This is a great opportunity to defeat him, so they agree to head to Babel and confront the king. Meanwhile, the king has taken his troops and carriage on the journey to Babel, unaware of what awaits him there. We return to our heroes, who are setting up tents and preparing food, and they start working together. They take Emilio and Shun to scout the area, while the others handle their tasks. Luz becomes friends with Alice, who initially thought they were bandits or something similar. However, Luz is happy with her presence because there aren't many women on the team. Then Luz asks, "Isn't Emilio the only heir of King Delis?" Alice replies, "Yes, the king has no children." At that moment, Luz asks about Shun and why the two always fight. The girl then says, "I don't know why they hate each other, but what I know about Shun is that he comes from the surface and has a sacred weapon like us." After that, we return to the three less enthusiastic people, and Shun feels annoyed with them. One is too serious, another is quiet, while the third is overly cheerful, making him uncomfortable. Why do you want to overthrow the king, despite being clearly weaker than his army and almost losing your lives today? At that moment, he spoke of the growing injustice in Endor, how the poor in this land are trampled upon and made to suffer, whether monster or human. Everyone experiences oppression and torture even when they've done no wrong. He continued, telling them that everyone who stood with him now were people who had been oppressed and had fought hard. Dimo gathered them together, striving to change this world filled with injustice. That's why he formed this team, and everyone wanted to help him. After that, he couldn't continue his words, and then he told them, "Leave here. I'll go alone." And indeed, they left him, and he was reminded of his past. He was once a poor and ragged child, even eating from trash. Unfortunately, the thugs never left him alone and constantly beat him up. The boy was an orphan, with no one, and he used to sleep on snowy streets until one day Dimo came to him and invited him to join his team. From then on, his life changed. Let's go back to Pascal, who had a tool to measure the ocean's power. At that time, Dimo came to know him and asked, "Do you really work in the royal laboratory?" Pascal replied, "I used to, but now I live alone." Dimo then asked, "What do you think King Dils wants from all of this, and why is he doing it?" Unfortunately, Pascal explained that no one could guess or understand the king's thoughts because he never discussed anything with anyone, and the only person who could understand his mind was Emilio. At that, Demo left him and went away, having received no answer, while Pascal looked at his measuring device and felt fear when he saw that the sacred power was beginning to diminish, just as he had suspected. At that moment he thought, so, was the construction of Babel from the beginning the cause of this? Or is there another reason? The next day, they all prepared for their new journey, each with their own purpose. Emilio wanted to meet the king and take his revenge on him, while Shun wanted to return to the surface and rid it of those people. After some time, they arrived at a new place near the sea, and Shun was delighted to see its strange view. Demo explained to him that this area is called Amadeus, the largest sea city in Endor, and that they had to pass through this city to reach Babel. But before that, they would pass by another island full of monsters. After a while, Shun and Emilio went to their room, and before they could start fighting as usual, Pascal informed them that the path they would take was very cold, so they needed to buy thick clothing to avoid freezing. Of course, the two of them didn't like each other and didn't want to go together, so Alicia decided to go with them. After some time, they walked through the city with enthusiasm until they met Demo and the others, who were preparing everything to move tomorrow. But Demo didn't like Shun's attire, which clearly looked like it came from the surface. So Ilo gave him a scarf to change his appearance a bit. Then Demo suggested he try the local specialty, which was famous and worth a try. After some time, they moved around the city to buy the necessary supplies, but Shun had no money, only one coin from the surface that was useless. Even Emilio had no money, so Alicia was the only one financing them that day, bringing enough money with her. As they walked, Emilio sensed someone moving quickly behind them, but they continued on and tried new food. After enjoying their time there and buying some items, suddenly, a young child attacked Emilio and stole his weapon, then ran quickly. Emilio ran after him with his friends and eventually managed to catch him. Before he could strike him, he saw the young boy's terrified younger siblings. At that moment, Alicia tried to calm the children and was moved, realizing that they stole to survive, a stark contrast to Emilio, who was used to palace life and knew nothing of his people's hardships. Shun began playing with the children to calm them from what had happened, and he continued to join in the games. Later that night, they returned to the hotel. Suddenly, a strange girl attacked them, but Emilio quickly protected them and drew his sacred weapon to ward off the strange attack. Shun also drew his weapon, and the three stood tensely, unsure who was attacking them until the strange girl appeared. They lowered their weapons, confused by her presence, and Emilio approached her to ask about her family. However, the girl suddenly glared at him in anger and attacked him with her strange weapon. Luckily, Shun quickly pulled him away from Emilio and threw explosive stars that detonated immediately upon impact. Strangely, the stars appeared automatically in large numbers, and the girl attacked them with her weapon, which was her sacred weapon. They were puzzled by how a girl could be so powerful. However, Emilio didn't care and quickly drew his weapon and charged at her, but at the last second, the girl vanished and reappeared elsewhere, attacking them with all her weapons while saying, "I will kill the prince." Emilio struggled to parry her attacks, and when he saw Shun approaching to strike, his body froze, unable to move. The girl ruthlessly knocked him aside and aimed her weapon at Emilio, intending to kill the prince. She attacked, causing a large explosion, but Emilio was protected by a magical shield that appeared just in time to save him. Then, Demo appeared behind the girl, who immediately moved away from him and began attacking him fiercely. Demo skillfully blocked her attacks, undeterred by the girl's strength. He kept pursuing her and counterattacking with his weapon, trying to capture her before she could escape. The girl kept throwing explosives, but Demo was unfazed and retaliated until he stood directly in front of her and struck with his weapon. As an explosion occurred, Demo swiftly got behind her and restrained her. When he saw the necklace around her neck, he understood why the girl was so vicious. At that moment, Yao said, "This girl is a professional assassin. Most of them are orphans and poor. Those with sacred talents are taken, cleansed, sold on the black market, trained to fight, and sold to nobles and kings.